Hello and welcome. The first comment today is from someone asking, how can I take refuge in the three gems? So, Tisarana Pancha Sila, taking refuge in the triple gem and the 5 precepts. That is the Pali expression for that practice, that ceremony, which, if you're living near a Buddhist temple, monastery, you can visit there and they will happily offer you Tisarana Pancha Sila, the opportunity to take refuge in the triple gem and the 5 precepts. Or if, as has just passed, it is the Uposatha, you might take that opportunity to take 8 precepts. So for 24 hours in the day, as well as refraining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and taking of intoxicants, on 1 day or 2 days a month, you might, or even 1 day a week, you might choose to refrain also from eating in the afternoon, from entertainment, from beautification, and from lazing around on luxurious and comfortable furniture. This extends the support to your practice of renunciation, nekama, the Pali word for renunciation, and focus on the sila you have taken, the moral virtue, and the supportive additional precepts you have taken to strengthen that, and your practice of samadhi, concentration, focus, meditation, allowing the mind to settle and become calm within a more supportive structure, mentally and, if possible, physically, by taking refuge in a quiet place that you may visit or you segregate in your own home for the purpose of practice and meditation for that time only. This is called Kaya Viveka, refuge for the body. I have Spotty Dotty's stuck on the roof, but I think she can get down if she got up there. Squeaky Pops has similarly had the same problems recently, but he did learn eventually. The way up was also the way down. So, for you to take refuge, however, it may be that you're not near a Buddhist monastery or a temple. And although that's commonplace, that activity in Buddhist countries where there are many, you only have to walk 200 or 300 yards in either direction in the road. When you get to the road from the track where I live, but walk 200 to 300 yards in either direction, you will come across a Buddhist monastery. There may be a lot of monks there, or there may be just a few, but they're all over the place in countries such as this. So that's relatively easy. Although those ceremonies are usually confined to certain times of the day and certain occasions because of the numbers attending. If you're fortunate enough to have a Buddhist monastery or a Buddhist monk near you, you only have to find that one Buddhist monk, a bhikkhu, whom will be happy to offer you that opportunity to take Tisarana Pancha Sila. But if you're alone and at home, you just turn to the pages in the chanting book where it says taking of refuges and precepts, and usually there are 2 or 3 sections of 5 precepts, 8 precepts, and sometimes for people living in the monastery long term, 10 precepts, where you also renounce the use of money. And the beautification and entertainment precept divides into 2. So really, already the 8 precepts is 9 precepts of the 10. But you can use your own discernment and choice, turning to those pages in the chanting book, where both in the Pali and English, there are the verses and the words, beginning with Buddham Saranang Gacchami, Dahnam Saranang Gacchami, Sanghang Saranang Gacchami, and then it goes on to say Dutiyampi and Tatiyampi. So firstly, you take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, the first of the triple gem, or the the first taking of refuge in those three. The Buddha, what we're doing when we take refuge in the Triple Gem is we are recollecting that as well as Kaya Viveka, a refuge for our physical body that we may have been fortunate enough to have found or not, even if not, we can take Chitta Viveka, that is refuge for the mind, in our teacher, the Buddha, whom in his infinite compassion offered and left as his legacy his teachings, the Dharma. And this has been handed down from the time of the Buddha, from his closest disciples, in that same lineage, in the Sangha that represents that today. So the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha is the refuge, the true refuge for the mind, Chitta Viveka. You can simply take a quiet moment at home, read through these lines in the book in your own language, and then usually one would follow this by the reaffirmation of taking the precepts. Anadipata Vairamani Sikha Padam Samadhiyami is the first. I will refrain from harming all sentient beings or killing all sentient beings, and so on. So, take the opportunity at home. It doesn't have to be a formality, a ceremony in a monastery with a bhikkhu. That might help you reaffirm and take refuge, but often the whole activity of that, going to the place and finding someone available to support that with you, may be just an obstacle in the way. The true refuge is in recognizing and reflecting on your Chitta Viveka, mental refuge in the Triple Gem, the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha, our teacher, his teachings, and the body of men and women who have ordained into the Arya Sangha, the noble order of fellow men, in the case of monks, ladies in the case of nuns, so bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, whom are quite separate but with similar aims, aspirations, have renounced worldly life, fully dedicating themselves to the practice. Having taken refuge in the Triple Gem, they've taken upon themselves over and above those 5, 8, 10 precepts. In the case of men, 227. In the case of ladies, 311 Patimokkha training rules or guidelines, a code of conduct coming from the Vinaya Pitaka, a substantial part of the Tipitaka, the Buddhist scriptures, which is also the Vinaya Pitaka, the Sutta Pitaka, and the subsequent Abhidharma. Now, I would, on Uposatha days, and I hope to in the future, as I tried to do, and it wasn't unsuccessful at the time, but on those days, have this ceremony for you to go along with or interact with at home, either live or the recorded version. But currently, I think because of the huge amount of rain and the power cuts and the things going on in Sri Lanka, the internet is very unstable. We only have, I don't know what it is, but you know, we don't have Wi-Fi, we have mobile internet, and it's not of the top quality one might find in some places. So it's a bit in and out, and the recording of such long videos is rather unstable, and live therefore not that reliable at the moment. Hopefully this will improve and enable that in the future, but until then I can only ask you to just go to your chanting book, which if you don't have, email me and I will send you a link. Okay, the next comment. Is there a question that you'd like to be asked, but no one asks you? If such a question exists, use this opportunity to answer it. So that's one of those questions one might like to have a little time to think about, isn't it? Or this is. Because I'm sure there are more, but the first question I think of always that people rarely ask is, how do I meditate? How to meditate? That is the most important question. After, well, the first question, how to take refuge in the Triple Gem. But in addition to that, what are the 5 precepts? So really, the 2 most important questions, and sorry to just adapt, you're saying 1, the most important question would be how to meditate, but without having sila, moral virtue, without knowing the precepts and striving to keep those precepts, then one will never be able to successfully have enjoyable and fruitful meditation practice, samadhi. So the 2 are inextricably linked in that sense. So it's one answer, but it sounds like 2 answers. So the question I'd like to be asked is, well, how do I meditate? What are the precepts? What do I need to do? But if it's just how to meditate, I'd say, well, firstly, you keep the precepts, and that is the answer. Secondly, you do nothing. You stop the intellectual activity, the research, the thinking, the listening, the reading, the watching, the trying to do, and you just relax. Allow your body to sit, settle, and become relaxed of its own accord, naturally, as you can with the mind, the thinking brain, allowing it to just settle, become calm, and eventually free from thought, but occasionally full of thinking. Papancha, overthinking, is the Pali word for overthinking. Rumination, if you like. So meditation is not a contemplation. The focus, the concentration is on a meditation object to allow the thinking brain to eventually, of its own accord and naturally, become free from thought. So the question I'd like always to be firstly asked is how to do that. Because when you start the practice, when you start to live in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path, then all of the other answers will come naturally. Panya. So the Noble Eightfold Path is 3 categories: sila, moral virtue; samadhi, meditation; panya, wisdom. If we keep sila, then we can meditate and we will develop a clear view. We will see clearly, the Pali word being vipassana, the characteristics of existence. We'll see clearly how our physical body does eventually settle and become relaxed. Or, indeed, you may notice uncomfortable aspects of your body in your posture and see the need, the urge, the desire to move. And you may have to move through discomfort. But this is an indication and showing you the nature of dukkha, suffering. And when you move and that suddenly is gone, and then another aspect of discomfort arises somewhere else, you can see all of the uncertainty and impermanence in these physical feelings, anicca. And this is also representative very clearly, visually, evidently, in your physiology of anatta, not self. How this physical body is not you and you have no control over it. All of this wisdom is just coming from that experience of sitting and observing, attempting to observe just one thing, a meditation object. But through the difficulty of doing that and your mind wandering, it is, if you try to sit still, attempt to just not move for a set amount of time, Rather than your mind overthinking and being led into papancha, overthinking, rumination, it will be drawn towards the discomfort. Your thinking brain will be drawn towards the discomfort of the body and its seemingly need to move. And eventually you'll develop the discipline to just remain with that feeling and not move. And notice how even without moving, eventually it will too pass away. This is showing you physically the truth of the Four Noble Truths, that there's suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering. And this is the path leading to the end of suffering, this Noble Eightfold Path of Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, mindfulness and concentration. But even without looking deeply into those individual aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path, with that overview of moral virtue, meditation and wisdom, it is enough to be practicing what the Buddha teaches, or recognizing through your practice what the Buddha teaches, seeing it clearly that there is suffering and there is an end of suffering. We all are watching this, listening to this, to some extent, to find for ourselves an end to any dissatisfaction we have in life, or an end to our suffering, our concerns, our worries. We're looking for something, an answer. It's not for more suffering, it's not for more dissatisfaction, it's for an alleviation of our discomfort. And that's where it is in the words of the Buddha, in the Four Noble Truths. And that's how we alleviate that, through the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. So the one question I always would like to get, rather than speculative questions about how do you survive on one meal a day, or why do you live in Sri Lanka and not India, or why did you become a monk, the most important question is, how do I meditate? Not what I'm doing, what I do, although from my experience that is useful to you by way of example. I hope it's useful. But any aspects of that that aren't, then you can just leave that, put it aside, and take from what we talk about regularly here, the useful aspects, and put it into practice and try it for yourself. I'm not just saying words to be believed or followed blindly, but giving you ideas of ways to practice yourself, like taking refuge regularly, reminding yourself of the precepts regularly, every day practicing meditation, when you wake up and before you go to sleep, and if possible at any time during the day, giving yourself the opportunity to just sit and do nothing, no things for a little while, a determination to just focus on a meditation object for that period of time. When people ask about that, it's wonderful, but it's also very rare. People visit here and they seem to be in rather a hurry. They want to bring as much goods and gifts and offerings, and that's very appreciated, the requisites we need, but we only need so much as bhikkhus. We lead a very simple life. But people dress up, bring the stuff, bring the goods, and then maybe ask a quick question, which is usually more a statement about what they're doing, and then they're looking at the time and they're itching to go. Now, if someone walks in here and sits down, empty-handed, on the floor, closes their eyes, that's not a question, but it's an answer. That's what they want to do. They've come here to meditate. That absence of a question is the best question. But if they sit down and say, is it okay if I just sit here and meditate? I would be so happy to hear that and say, yes, you can sit there and meditate for as long as your heart desires. And you could sit here for 24 hours, 48, a week if you wish, in samadhi, in jhana, or just resting with nothing to say, no questions to ask. So sometimes no questions are the best questions. But the intention to practice and find the answers to your own questions is such a joy for me to see and experience. And it does happen from time to time. But mostly people are interested in all of the other speculative side of Buddhism, the devotional practices related to the religion of Buddhism, and not really so much what the Buddha was showing us, teaching us, going somewhere that's supportive of nothing other than to just sit and put mindfulness in front of you, first and foremost. Bringing flowers, incense, candles is wonderful as part of your devotional practices to support the rest. Taking refuge, Tisadana Panchasila, is great in support of following the Noble Eightfold Path. Moral virtue is at least half the Noble Eightfold Path, so very important to reflect upon and remind yourself of. But it doesn't take very long, 5 minutes at the most. That short ceremony, just to remind yourself, a reflection. Then the time should be in silence. When questions arise about that, the meditation, or issues over a precept one might be struggling on, then they are the pertinent questions. So that's, I hope, an idea. If I think of anything else, I'll come back to it. Hello Bhante, would this be considered half lotus posture? Okay, well I don't have a picture here or know what that's relating to, but this is half lotus posture that I'm sitting in now. My right foot is on my left thigh. My left foot is underneath my right thigh, if that makes sense. So it's not cross-legged like one might sit as a school child on the gym floor in assembly, where your legs are literally crossed. You just literally rest your right shin and calf on your left shin and calf. Foot on your left thigh, right foot on left thigh, left foot underneath right thigh. They're sort of more like a scissor, like this. Not as the Buddha is sitting behind us, that is full lotus, where firstly the left foot is put on the right thigh, and then you put the right foot on the left thigh over the top of the left shin and calf. So they do cross a bit, but they're still not pressing each other. So when one sits cross-legged, you're crossing bits and squashing the flesh into the bone. When one sits in any of the lotus postures, because you can sit with your right calf and shin just laying flat on the floor in front of the left calf and shin without the legs, and then your knees probably would be up like this more as you first begin this sitting posture. Eventually, as your pelvis opens up and relaxes and you become more subtle, your knees will be touching the floor. So you're like a tripod with your bottom and your knees being the 3 points in contact with the floor. And everything else is not pressing against each other, it's kind of just floating. It's relaxed, it's very comfortable. So that's, yes, the half lotus posture. Okay. I want to become a monk. Can I join with you? Well, unfortunately, you can't join with me because to become a monk, you need to ordain in a training monastery. So that would be a monastery which would have at least, well, for the ordination process there need to be 5 monks, a quorum, and many more representatives of the Sangha. But for the training process, once you've been ordained as a samana, you can live with probably just 1 or 2 monks in a monastery. But for your own benefit, you do need perhaps more support and a variety of teachers, because you may not always get on with everyone. And if there are more people there to help you, there will be some that varying during various progressions of your practice and your path leading towards ordination, because it takes quite some time living in a monastery before you're ready to ordain and before the Sangha will be ready to accept you to ordain or to accept your request to ordain. So you'd need to first live in a community of many more monks than just one. Also, for your ordination, you require, and also to have an upachara, a teacher whom you take dependence on, which we call nisaya. That bhikkhu has to be of at least 10 vasas in the robes, a bhikkhu themselves, for a minimum of 10. But ordinarily, usually, they are a bhikkhu of their mahateras. They are of at least 20 vasas. So a tero or tera is 10 vasas, mahatera is 20 vasas. Can you hear that cat? I don't know what's going on. So upwards of 10 vasas, which I am not quite yet. So I cannot be your teacher. But I would also, even if I was 10 or 20 vasas, living alone like this, practicing in solitude, isn't the environment to train. You need to be a samanera for 1 or 2 years on 75 precepts, the Sakya training rules. And these are really like manners, etiquette, deportment, code of conduct, even how we go to the toilet, how we perform our ablutions, how we eat our meals, all of these things. And all of this training needs close supervision, which I personally cannot offer, as I'm here to practice alone. So there are many training monasteries which afford you this opportunity that you can choose from. One where they speak your own mother tongue would be preferable. This makes the process considerably easier. Even if it's in a foreign country, you'll need, if you're English speaking, naturally, then English speaking teachers, just to facilitate that more easily. Okay, so I'm just going to skip that one for a minute and move on to, oh my word, that'll teach me. The only way to deal with this one is to just read it in full. So again, once I encourage you to try and make concise questions. They can be speculative, nothing wrong with that, but one doesn't need to give me an essay on another philosophy and then at the very end just say, what's your opinion on that? If it isn't the Dharma, I don't really have an opinion on it, and we don't compare other philosophies here. We know that the Dharma, for the Dharma there's no competition or comparison. It is simply the truth as a philosophy. It isn't a belief system or a doctrine, but a way, a recommendation of trying for yourself, seeing for yourself the answers. So in that sense, it has no competition and therefore it's the speculation and comparison to religions that are belief systems or theistic ideas or philosophies and even some yogic practices is not relevant to what the Dharma is, the teachings of the Buddha. There is suffering and there is a cause of suffering. This is the nature of existence, which relates to all philosophies. The Buddha is showing us through the Noble Eightfold Path how to become free from suffering in this lifetime and liberated from future rebirth. So let me attempt to try and read through this. It's probably not so long, it just, when it goes over more than one screen, I find it a little daunting. My question is about serious mental problems, or so-called dark night of the soul, experiences that some people go through during or after meditation, especially Vipassana-based practice or retreats, which can last for a long time or even permanently. When I first heard about such cases, I got scared and stopped meditating for a month. After that, I stopped doing Vipassana meditation and started practicing Samadhi meditation with metta meditation before and after, and I've been doing it that way ever since. I've heard that these problems can sometimes arise during Vipassana practice, especially when practitioners try to gain insight into anatta, or destruct the sense of self too quickly. Do these difficulties, I think we're coming to a question, do these difficulties usually happen because people dive too deeply into Vipassana without enough grounding in the Dharma, or are they caused by bad karma? And then you say, I'm worried about that I might face similar issues one day without a teacher to guide me, and that I wouldn't be able to deal with them on my own. So it's quite a lot there. I better read the last bit just in case. Is focusing on metta and samadhi a safe and wholesome way to practice without risking such serious mental disturbances? Right now, I want safely to deepen my concentration in meditation and hopefully reach jhana one day. Okay. So dispense with all what you've heard, read, seen on YouTube. The Buddha's path, the teachings of the Buddha, the Dharma. You do have a teacher. You have the Buddha. He's with you. The teacher may not be physically there, but his legacy, the Dharma, is. And the Dharma is contained in the Sutta Pitaka, his words, the teachings, as well as the Vinaya Pitaka, but that's more for monks and nuns, ordained bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. But for your purposes, your practice, it's all there in the Sutta Pitaka. You don't even really need to include in that, at this stage, the Abhidharma. It is just a more complex and in-depth look at the psychology of the mind pertaining to the suttas and the teachings of the Buddha and this practice, where some of the answers to your questions might be found. But don't make it that or so complicated. Keep it simple. Firstly, keep precepts, all 5 precepts. Then sit and practice meditation. Forget all these words, samadhi, jhana, vipassana, when you don't use them for the right purposes. Vipassana just means seeing clearly. Now yes, there are intensive meditation courses which have adapted, use this name as coined a phrase, if you like, Vipassana meditation schools, Vipassana traditions, Vipassana insights, and it just means, it's a Pali word that means seeing clearly. Now yes, there are some meditation retreats, organizations that might involve very intensive practices or methods of practice, or trying to practice meditation, that are very disciplined and not for everybody. But like I was saying, I'm not talking about those here. We're not comparing what the Buddha, the Dharma teaches. The Buddha is your teacher. His legacy for you is this Dharma, and it's supported by the Sangha, us, bhikkhus, and also bhikkhunis. So, rely on that only. Stop watching the scaremongering documentaries and the videos that are not coming from a place of one person's individual experience, but are usually a collection of many bad experiences that have come out of, however, a huge number, countless number, infinite number, almost, of good experiences. So even in some of these very intensive meditation retreats one might hear of, where someone comes out of it with a bad experience, they're usually very rare in comparison to the number of people that enjoy such retreats. Now, I'm not speaking about specific organizations or meditation retreats, and I have not been on such retreats myself. I've only practiced in monastic environments, so with the support of monks and other practitioners. But I know very many people and have close relationships with people who do use those organizations and retreats successfully and enjoy them, and people who work on them and in them and are part of those organizations. And very occasionally people whom don't tell the whole truth on their application forms with regards to their own state of mental well-being, and it always asked that you are not suffering from any mental health issues before you enter into such retreats. And it's normally, I think, recommended you start with the shorter periods of time first anyway. But putting that aside again, because I'm not an authority on those and can't compare it to this practice we're talking about here, with regards to living within the parameters of the Noble Eightfold Path, and in accordance with that, you cannot do yourself any damage. You can only improve your mental health. So even with mental health conditions, living in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path can only help that. It will not lead to an exacerbation of any psychosis or problems that you may have dormant there. All of this dark night of the souls or whatever is just some trendy phase. Well, not so trendy now, I think it's quite archaic, but it's not, it's some speculative idea of someone's bad experience of meditation, where they have not been practicing meditation in accordance with the way I talk about meditation here. And in that sense, you shouldn't be susceptible to it. As far as your own practice is concerned, try to just focus on the breath. Yes, you can use for a warm-up some recollection of loving kindness and compassion and joy for others. Metta meditation is, again, it's you're through meditation hoping to develop the quality of metta, and I just spoke about this the other day at some length, so I won't do it again now, but just maybe, bring to mind those that, firstly, loving kindness for yourself by giving yourself the opportunity to meditate, then bring to mind those that are close to you, not so close, and then further away. But no more than that for a few minutes as a warm-up or warm-down. And perhaps preferably just use the little forms of Metta Bhavana chanting in the chanting book. It's a short warm-up chant before your meditation to help clear the mind. And that's enough. Then just sit and watch the breath. That's enough for as long as you possibly can. And there's going to be no dark nights of souls or psychoses or any problems. That's all coming from your anxiety and stress about what hasn't even happened yet, because you've heard somewhere that it's happened to others. But all sorts of things happen to all sorts of people, but the majority are okay. In all walks of life, in all activities. So don't just focus on the bad news. Okay, the media, the news itself, and everything you see on perhaps the internet when scrolling around is generally negative. Good news, good stuff, doesn't sell, doesn't get the numbers. Someone just sitting there saying, hey, everything's really okay, isn't it? You're not dead yet. Just sit and enjoy the breath. Which is really what it's all about. Isn't very exciting. The dark night of the souls, and this retreat and that retreat led to so-and-so's blah, all the bad news that can come from that grim newspaper headline or podcast or article featuring the first-hand descriptions of someone's horrific experience in a meditation retreat. There are millions, literally millions, of first-hand accounts of completely the opposite of what good those retreats have done for people, compared to one or two that have really been dug from the depths. And yes, were bad experiences. But again, these stories, these views come from usually one perspective, not from both sides. So ignore all that stuff and concentrate on your practice, your own meditation, what you're doing, rather than what others are doing. And if that's in line with the Dharma, what the Buddha teaches us, then I've got a new kind of microphone here on today, so excuse me, keep fiddling with it. I'm just checking it's in the right, roughly in the right place. It's for your benefit. I haven't developed some nervous affliction, although it might look like that. So, I mean, I think that's all I can say about all that. Forget about the dark night of the souls and get on with your practice. And if I've got time, perhaps I'll just tackle this last comment here. If you, back to the last comment, if you want to just make some concise examples, questions relating to, if I haven't fully answered what it is you were looking to, I mean, you were saying, is what you're doing right? If it's doing you good, then keep doing what you're doing, yes. And you're practicing samadhi in that you're focusing, you're concentrating on a meditation object, hopefully, after your meditation. And this can do you no harm. Yes, that is correct. But if you need further guidance, then please comment again or send an email, and I'm here to support your meditation practice, of course. Right, here you go. Lying down, samadhi. Laying awake at night, not sleeping, watching breath, anapanasati practice. Can you talk about this in an extension of sitting, standing and walking over a 24-hour period? So the Buddha teaches meditation in 4 postures: sitting, standing, walking and lying down. Basically what he's saying there is you can meditate in any posture. It's not overly important. But we tend to sit for meditation as being the best way to be awake and focused on a meditation object. And when one might get tired, or the opposite, restless, one might get up and practice walking meditation, up and down, just focusing on the process of walking itself. So these are the most commonly practiced methods. Now really, to be left aside from that, and only for the most experienced meditators, is the lying down posture. Because most people, when their mind relaxes, their body relaxes, and they're laying down, will just fall asleep, unless you're particularly restless. Now, if it's a case of, because you do mention, I think somewhere that you're referring to this being at night time, often people, when they cannot sleep, yes, the heading of the email is nighttime anapanasati. Often when people can't sleep at night, they just lay there and observe the breath. Now this is a very good idea, but if you can't sleep because you have restlessness and worry, the 4th of the 5 hindrances, the 3rd of the 5 hindrances is laziness or tiredness or lethargy, which usually leads to falling asleep. Now, this isn't a hindrance if you're laying at night unable to sleep, awake. So you can, yes, take that as a very good opportunity to observe the breath, and you may be able to get into samadhi that way. But I would suggest it's unlikely. If you were to get into samadhi, you would probably then, because you're laying down, fall asleep before you can get into deeply absorbed states of meditation. Now, also it may be that you require sleep, but just because of restlessness and worry, are unable to sleep. So on this occasion, I would recommend that one gets out of bed, sits on the floor and sits upright, and then practices anapanasati. This will lead to tiredness, the third hindrance, as opposed to the fourth hindrances of restlessness and worry. Especially if your brain is tired, your body is tired from a hard day, and then you'll be fighting the third hindrance of lethargy, tiredness, and start to nod off. And then you can get back in your bed and go to sleep, which might have been the original intention anyway. And it might have been that we were using anapanasati as a way to, like, count sheep to go to sleep, for example. But it will probably more likely lead to more wakefulness, more restlessness. So always get out of bed and go to the sitting posture again. This will enable you to fight restlessness and worry. And it will lead to the other hindrance. One hindrance usually replaces another, of tiredness, and enables sleep. But if you're just practicing and using the lying down posture because you have physical difficulties with either walking or sitting, then that is okay also. But it is harder and usually only recommended for advanced meditation practitioners. I very rarely practice laying down meditation because I lay on the floor anyway to sleep at night. So every night when I lay down, observe the breath, I go to sleep. So if I start doing that in the day, I will invariably go to sleep. And sometimes that's fine, I do that. But for samadhi, I would prefer the sitting posture. And when I'm meditating with others, hopefully, if I'm guiding people in meditation, they're able to sit. Because when you're sitting, if you start to doze off, it's evident, you know. You nod like this and wake up with a start. So try and avoid laying down. But at night time, yes, anapanasati is an extension. Meditation, the extension, talk about how this is an extension of sitting, standing and walking. It's not so much an extension, but an amalgamation. Our meditation should be, our mindfulness is carried out throughout all of our daily activities, while sitting, standing and walking and lying down. And eventually, our last thought should be the last breath. So we should recall, as we wake in the morning, and our mindfulness is on our breath, the first breath we are mindful of when we wake, the first thought should be to recollect the last breath we had before we went to sleep. So we're mindful of our last breath at night before we sleep, and our first breath in the morning when we wake. And each and every breath as we go about our daily activities throughout the day. This is samasati, right mindfulness. And when we're not observing the breath, we're mindful of the activity, that which we are doing in the present moment, here and now. All of our actions of body, speech and mind with mindfulness, samasati. Keeping everything within the parameters of the Noble Eightfold Path, within right view, intention, speech, actions, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, samasati, which helps with our meditation when we have the opportunity to sit, samadhi, sama-samadhi. Well, on that note, I hope there's something useful there that you can pick up and use. If not, then just let it go and don't let it trouble you. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu. Any comments on the sound or the lighting would be appreciated. We're just slowly making little adjustments from time to time to get everything nice and comfortable for either listening or for watching and listening.